Okay, we're going to start. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Lori is my district director, she wanted to be introduced, so she came up here. What she really wants is for us to be able to capture your email and that you were here today, and then we will include you in the newsletters and things like that. So she'll be passing it around. Thank you, Lori. I also want to give a shout out to Corey Norman, my chief of staff. Corey, many of you know Corey. Oh, and Kenny, there's Kenny right there. Kenny helps us in my office, does a lot of things as a military affairs specialist, and thank you, Kenny, for being here. Well, it's nice to be with all of you this morning. So much to talk about. Many of you were here to hear the state legislators. Let me just one more time give them a shout out. Boy, we're not perfect, but I'll tell you what, on our worst day in the state, you beat our best day back in DC, right? And so yeah, we love our state leaders, our legislators, and all those who work. So, oh, good news. There we go. Oh, much better. Thank you. All right. Maybe just a minute or two about Washington, D.C. I give you an update there, and then I want to spend the bulk of the time answering your questions. Many of you have been to a town hall meeting before. Let me just throw out a couple of things I think that helps us have a good experience. I am here to do one of two things, and you'll get to decide how much of each of those I do. One is to simply tell you what I'm thinking, what's on my mind, and the other is to hear what's on your mind. And sometimes somebody really, that's what they want to do. They don't really have a question, and they just want to tell me what's on their mind. That is really good, and I appreciate that as well. About the only couple rules I have is that we don't want to get stuck and spend the whole hour on one topic, right? And so sometimes I'm going to move on, even though I haven't really thoroughly answered your question to the extent you would like, but acknowledging that we want to cover a whole host of topics. And likewise, the other rule is if one person is kind of dominating, we're going to gracefully try to move on and give as many people an opportunity to answer questions as possible. Does that sound okay? Other than that, no questions off limits. I'm happy to answer really what's ever on your mind. Just quickly, an update on Washington, D.C. It's not going to surprise you that a lot of the talk is centered around the virus. I've had a number of hearings this week on it. I don't think I know any more than what you would get on the news. My briefings really they're not classified. They're not really full of any information other than what you have. So I don't think I really have any secrets for you. It was interesting. I was interviewed on the radio about a bill that I'm launching. It's not a bill, but a letter we sent to the Federal Trade Commission about these dating apps. And they interviewed me for about 5 minutes on the radio, and then they said, tell us about the virus. And I made like this short little comment, and my wife said that for the rest of the day, all it was lead story, Congressman Curtis talks about the virus. But my comment was this, and I actually think it's pretty accurate. I think for the bulk of us, we're going to, the impact of this is not as much health related as it's going to be financially related. And I'm not sure we perceive that, right? Originally when we thought about a pandemic or something, that's not to say that we couldn't have serious health issues individually, but I'm equally, if not more, worried about the financial ramifications for those near retirement and others who will be impacted by this in a pretty significant way. Okay, I'll keep talking, but I'm ready to answer questions. Raise your hand if you have some. If not, yes, way back in the back, and welcome.
Yeah, my name is Mark Van Morris. I live here in Spanish Fort. When you are a member of the majority next year, and that will be a fact. What's going to be the agenda? Are you going to stay away and let the Democrats know that you're going to stay away from this, all these things that have been going on to try to take the president down. He's a great president. He's doing the right things. He's accomplished a lot of things. And I can't speak for America like, they talk about all Americans, do this or do that. I just want to know, will you support in a good way the things that he's trying to do?
Sure. And let me click off a couple of those things that I think we would like to do if we get the majority. and things that need to be done in the country that are very, very important. The first thing that came to mind, I'm not sure if these are necessarily in priority, is prescription drugs in healthcare. I think Republicans are dying to have another swing at it. To be honest, I think we blew it a little bit, meaning we all knew we didn't like Obamacare, but Republicans struggled to come up with the alternative. And I think we've now we'll have had 2 years to be prepared for it. There's an organization I belong to called the Republican Study Committee that's come out with a really comprehensive healthcare approach that is really good. And I believe one of missions number one, if given the majority, is to go straight to healthcare, prescription drug costs, and see if we can make some significant progress there. Another item, this might surprise you, but we need tax reform 2.0. There are some things that need to be cleaned up from tax reform that we didn't get right the first time, and I know that's a pressing issue for Republicans as well that would like to make sure we jump on. I strongly hope that we can make significant progress with immigration. Let me give you one really good example. You could bifurcate immigration into a number of categories. One that's really hurting our country right now is the worker visa, our inability to solve that. And I've got a bill in right now. It's called state-sponsored visas. It allows the state to actually control a number of visas and issue those visas. And there's so many categories of immigration I think that we could jump on and hopefully we can show progress on, because I think the American people are just really, really dying for immigration reform. Off the top of my head, those are just a couple. And yes, yeah. Yes, sir.
Congressman, it's more of a compliment more than anything. But
then I'm going to hand you the mic.
This is more of a compliment, but we want to say how positive your advertisements are. We love your accomplishments, the way that you presented those on behalf of Utah. That was humorous. I couldn't stop laughing.
Has anybody not seen them? And we're going crazy with them. You haven't seen them. Okay. Let me just make a quick comment. Thank you for bringing that up. This is an interesting thing. I'm not in the middle of a campaign. And yet I felt like several things. I felt a desire to be accountable to the people in my district. I've been in office 2 years, and I wanted to tell them what I have done. I also wanted to show that not everything in Washington is gloom and doom, that we can make fun of ourselves, that we're getting things done. One of the things I regret the very most is that that all of the good that's happening is not what you see on TV, and that every day good men and women in Congress are working hard, getting bills passed, and getting things done. And we don't have to be critical of each other to do that. And that was kind of the whole message. And you know, the question I get asked the most about those ads is, was that really me on the snowmobile? And did I really step in the poop? And it was me on the snowmobile. I did all of that. And I can't tell you how much time we spent finding the right cow pie. True story. We were out in this cold day, and it was a farm out here in Provo. We were analyzing, like, okay, well, this one will work good. And so the first one we picked, it looked beautiful on TV, but I stepped on it, and my foot, it was so hard, my foot just slid right off of it. So we found that nice and gooey one, and we knew we could only get one take with it. So thanks for giving us a light minute this morning. And we'll go over here and then right here, yeah.
You answered the question.
Okay. All right, good. Yes, Gary.
What are your thoughts on spending the national debt and controlling the life?
Yeah, super frustrating. Let me tell you an experience I had several weeks ago. I had a phone call from a very, very good friend. He and I had worked together in a number of capacities, and he was so frustrated. And here was the cause of his frustration. The National Republican Party had sent him a survey and asked him to rank his priorities. And debt and deficit was not even on the list. And that's coming from the National Republican Party. Imagine my shock when I was newly elected just over 2 years ago, went back to Washington, D.C. with a Republican majority, and the Speaker of the House and his leadership team lobbied me to vote for a $300 billion increase to the debt ceiling. This was my Republican leadership lobbying me to vote for a $300 billion increase. I don't know how many of you remember, but I had a town hall in Spanish Fork the day after that vote. And this is why town halls are so good. It's the single best accountability I know of. Can you imagine being me, coming looking you in the eye, if I had voted yes for that? And I kept telling leadership, I just promised, because I just gone through an election, I promised people I wouldn't do this. And this is, I mean, sometimes the rumors of kind of the pressure we're under to vote are true, and sometimes, mostly they're not. But literally on this vote, the night of the vote, I went to dinner with my wife, and every 30 minutes I got a phone call from a different member of Republican leadership, and the phone call went something like this: we need you. You got to be part of the team. We need your vote on this. And my answer was consistently, you don't understand. I'm from Utah, right? We don't do this in Utah. This is so out of harmony with Utah's values. So what am I doing about it? Besides voting, and it's actually one of the things we put in the ad is how many times I voted against irresponsible spending. But I don't think that's enough. I'm trying to be proactive with it. And let me tell you a couple things I've done. One, to be honest, is more feel-good than practical, but it's this one. If we go into a shutdown, Congress doesn't get paid. How obvious is that, right? I mean, that's not going to save our country from a financial perspective, but I guarantee you, if Congress didn't get paid, if we went into a shutdown, we would not be going into shutdowns. We would solve this. And the problem with shutdowns is, you know, I think before we really got into the shutdown mode, I think people said, hey, let's do shutdowns, right? Let's get the government to shut down, stop spending money. But this is what I've seen. I've been there now 26 months, and I've seen it's 5 or more shutdowns, and this is the pattern. We can't come to agreement, so we go into a shutdown. The pressure mounts so high that my colleagues will then vote for things they wouldn't otherwise vote for to get us out of the shutdown. And then we go back and pay all the money back to all the employees and everything that we didn't get during the shutdown. And there are other ramifications. Our national park shut down, and that hurts the Utah economy. For instance, any contract like for training during that period of time, even if we're under contract, we can't fulfill that. And so we have to pay that, and we didn't even get the training. And so you can just see shutdowns are a bad idea. So that's one. The most important thing that I think is the mother lode, if we can get some momentum behind this, is it's modeled after Utah, and it's my baseline budget bill. And in essence, in Utah, in our legislature, they agree at the first of the session, if they can't agree, that instead of going into shutdown, they'll revert to last year's budget. That's an uncomfortable thing. Nobody wants to do that. So there's pressure on them to get to a budget. I've introduced a baseline budget bill in Congress with a small little tweak, which is, it'll make you all smile. If we don't agree, we go to last year's budget minus 2%. Yeah, you like that? And then guess what?
10.
Yeah,
No, I'll
well,
take 2.
if we can't agree in 60 more days, it goes another 2.
Awesome.
So the point is not to put us in a position of compromise, right, as a country. It's not good to shut the military down, right? We don't want radical cuts to the military, but to put enough pressure on my colleagues, and it's been really frustrating. This is since I've been there, and it's this way years before I got there, is we don't budget. We wait till we get to these cliffs, and then a bunch of people go into a back room, Republicans and Democrats, strike a deal, and come out and they know this is how they get enough votes. Oh, this congressman from over here, he wants this in the bill, we're going to put that in the funding bill. They know they have enough votes. They come out, tell me what it is. Less than 24 hours, almost always it's less than 24 hours, I'm voting on that, right? And it stinks. And that's why I always vote no, because it stinks. And I feel so powerless, right, in that position because they have enough votes going into it. I want you to know the Utah delegation, we work well together on this. We're united. There are others around the country. We just have to do a better job of making this a priority across the country. Thank you, Utah, for being the example and for holding my feet to the fire. And I'll keep fighting that fight. We got a lot of work to do, though. Here and then back. Wait, let's go. Let me just go here, there, and then we'll hold. Okay, I'll come this direction, and and I'll try not to take so long with my answers too. And we'll.
One of the things that I think is going to help push that kind of ideology is getting new congressmen and new blood in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, from a tech standpoint, a lot of these social media platforms have very left-leaning people in control. We've just seen in the last 48 hours, the third largest website in the world that has third most traffic of any other site, that has the largest pro-conservative, pro-Trump forum on the internet, has just been completely shut down by their owners under a false premise of trying to make sure that we don't have wrong things by 1983 or Orwellian thought. But they're claiming it's under hate speech and that it's not protected under the First Amendment. So my big concern is that these platforms, they call themselves platforms under the 230, Section 230, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. You probably are. That's one of the big talks amongst guys in Congress, it seems. But I'd rather see them either need to declare themselves a publisher or fully accept the First Amendment agreement and say if it's not covered by the First Amendment, it's allowed, and then just let people on their own, individuals, block out users or block out content they don't want to see.
Yeah, and I'm just going to agree with that. Not necessarily, I don't know that it was a question, but maybe simplify it a little bit for everybody.
Well, I guess the question is, what can we do to get Section 230 clarified and get these guys rigged in?
Yeah, so the bottom line is we've entered an era where there's this huge gray line between a social media platform and a media company. And we need to draw that line and define it. And then they have to stick with those rules.
Yeah.
I can't remember, Eugene did it there, and then we'll go around your table, yeah. Super loud, if you would.
The Utah State Republican Party platform states, "We demand honesty, integrity, morality, and accountability of our public officials. We will work to expose and stop corruption." What specific things have you done to demand honesty, integrity, morality, and accountability of our very highest public officials, and to expose and stop corruption at the very highest levels of the federal government?
So first of all, let me say that I believe for all of us, this begins with ourselves. I'm not perfect, but I try to hold myself to that standard, first and foremost. Second, I think, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say under Democratic leadership in the House, every conceivable thought of, dreamed of way to investigate and poke the president has been done. And I've not stood in the way of any of that. As a matter of fact, supported the Mueller investigation, you know that, encouraged people to hold judgment back until that came out. And I think that people who do not like our president frequently expect, to be honest, too much of Congress. Our job is oversight. Your job is to select who it is, right? And I think a lot of times those who oppose the president want to put their burden on us. And I don't think that's right. I think that it's been a mistake for those who oppose President Trump for 4 years to concentrate on trying to destroy him instead of trying to pick a candidate that could beat him. And I think they'll pay a price for that, quite frankly.
My question was, what specifically have you done?
I told you, I
to
supported
demand-
the Mueller investigation. I mean, I've done Congress's duty, and under Democratic leadership, I've had more opportunities to do that than anybody could have imagined.
I'm still not hearing any specific things that you have done.
That's because you're not listening. Yeah, I mean, every single thing that's been put forth by Nancy Pelosi, right? That's what Congress has done. I mean, everything. That's all they have done.
It sounds like you didn't fight that at all. You just said, look, let's go ahead.
No, I felt like it was very important for the Mueller investigation to play out. I didn't know what they would find. I felt impeachment was way premature. They found an objective, which was impeachment, and then went and found the charge. Yep. And you can imagine, I won't go too deep into impeachment unless you want me to, and then I will. This is one of those topics we could easily spend an hour on. Imagine my frustration trying to be open-minded about this, not being able to ask questions, not being able to call witnesses, not being able to talk about what I'm hearing in the hearings, and then seeing the entire transcript released to the press, and me threatened with, if I even talk about it, even though it's been released to the press, I could be accused of releasing classified information. It was a very frustrating experience to try to do exactly what you've said. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I've learned about your immigration bill, and I'd love to hear a little more about your reasoning behind that bill. I like it. I would just like to hear a little bit more about why Utah might have a special reason.
Thank you. Let me give you a brief synopsis about the bill. I actually need to repeat the questions too, because we're on Spanish Fork TV, and sorry, you give me the signal if I'm not doing that. We're on Spanish Fork TV. Big shout out to Spanish Fork TV. Tremendous service here in the community. So the question was, I've got an immigration bill. Can I tell you just a little bit about it? So this is, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, one of my single biggest frustrations with our inability to solve anything on immigration is this glaring need that we have for workers here in our country, and let's just say in our state, right? You look at the agricultural community, you look at the construction community, the hospitality community, the high-tech community. There's hardly an industry in our state that isn't really struggling with finding good workers. Now, imagine if we had, which we do, a host of workers who are willing to obey the law, who are willing to pay taxes, who are willing to do everything we ask of them, who would come fill these jobs. You would think that we could line these two things up, right? And this has been the frustration, is that we haven't been able to line that up, and people are hurting. I get a very predictable email every spring from somebody who runs a landscape company who doesn't know if she can accept contracts because she doesn't know if she'll get the visas to get employees in to come do their work. It's a small business. Small businesses could be put out of business if not careful. So I heard about this idea from another congressman who had thought about it and decided not to run the bill. And when I heard about it, I said, I love this idea. And this is the idea, which is to give states an additional allocation of visas that they could turn down 100% or accept. It's up to the state. We're not going to force this on anybody. It's not going to solve the problem. It's a piece of solving the problem. And the state could decide how they use those visas, who they go to. And the state is accountable for people obeying the rules. If you don't reach a 97% accountability, meaning that if you can't at the end of that year show me that 97% of the people are compliant with the law, with paying taxes, and you know where they are, you lose your visas, right? So it's tough, right? But we think states can do that. And so states then need to track, follow, know what these people are doing. They decide where the visas go. We've built in a provision where you can do mutual understanding with other states. So for instance, if Colorado needed more people during the ski season and we needed more during agricultural, we could let them go back and forth between the states. What's not to like about this bill, right? It gives authority to states. It doesn't mandate to states. They don't have to do it. States have to be accountable to the federal government. Interestingly, I forget the year, I think it was 2011, the state of Utah actually passed a law to do this very thing. They had their hands slapped because states can't do this, only the federal government can do it. It is a federal issue, but the federal government can delegate to the states. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm working on. I'm trying to get bipartisan support for it. And to be honest, we're struggling a little bit with that. I'm looking for that one key Democratic co-sponsor that I can get where everything goes downhill after that, and not just anybody, if that makes sense. And so that's the stage we're at with the bill. The governor has endorsed it. The Cato Institute featured myself and the governor for about an hour on a podcast talking about it. They love it. I think it's an idea without a problem. I mean, I think it should be well received. If there is a problem, it's that there aren't enough visas to solve the problem. And so I would look at it as a little bit more of a pilot program. Like, let's prove, right, that it works, and then we'll ask for more visas. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we went here, and then who else at this table over here? And we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll try to zing through those as fast as I can too. Yeah.
Okay, you touched on healthcare just a little while back. I'm going to get a little bit more specific.
Okay.
I know there's a few vets in here tonight.
Thank you for your.
My father-in-law was a vet, my dad was a vet, I'm a vet, my son's a vet. I just read, I think 2 or 3 days ago, where they have cut now funding and shut down a number of clinics for veterans health care. And not only for the veterans, but their families and dependents. I want to know what's going on in Congress right now to ensure that the vets are going to get not only the coverage that they're getting now, but is it going to improve in the future?
I believe it is. My observation since being in Congress is nothing sells through as quickly as a vet's bill. There's unanimous bipartisan support. And I don't know the specifics of these clinics, and I'd be happy to look into them, but one of the things that we have made some progress on and want to make more progress on is that our veterans don't need to go to a specific veterans clinic to get services, right? So that, yeah, imagine being in rural Utah and being told you've got to drive up to Salt Lake City for a checkup, right? And so it could be tied to that as we free vets up to go to other, Kenny, Laura, you're pointing at.
Yeah, you just come see me, I can talk to you more about
Oh yeah, okay. If you'll hook up Kenny, he'll get you the specifics about which clinics and things. But I can just tell you there's nothing I've seen sell through as quickly as veterans issues in Congress. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you. I love your water bottle. It would have been so easy for you to open up your water bottle up there. So I just want to say thank you for going out to your car and getting yours. And then going back to immigration and kind of hand in hand with that is refugees. I know that's another big issue. I'm wondering if, similar to your immigration bill, if there's ever been discussion about individuals or communities sponsoring refugees. I know Canada does that. I'm wondering if that is something.
I'll tell you this. I was really proud to be from a state where the governor stood up, a very, very conservative state, right? And so he surprised a lot of people. And what did the governor say? Send them to Utah. We'll take care of them. And I don't have a roadmap to do that. Does that make sense? Like I do with my visa bill. But I can just tell you, I'm really proud that I'm from a state that understands. Look, there is a clear difference between a refugee and an immigrant. So we have to deal with immigration, but a refugee by definition is fleeing for their life. That is a definition of a refugee. And I think Utahns get that, right? And I think, I'll just tell you a quick story because this will get us a little bit off track, but when I was mayor, there was a very famous, it's kind of become famous talk from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at a conference time about us having more responsibilities with refugees. Some of you will remember that several years ago. So my office as mayor was bombarded with people that wanted to know how to help. So we said, we know how to solve this. We're going to pull together and do a refugee meeting. And we're going to tell people what they can do and how they can help and things like that. So we scheduled a meeting in the council chambers. It's a room not too different than this, would maybe sit 100 people. And quickly we got word that was not going to be adequate. So we found a stake center, and they agreed to let us hold it there. I arrived a half hour early. I couldn't park closer than a half a mile for this thing. And I walked in, I said, holy cow. I mean, this is, you think of your largest stake center that you've ever been in with all the capacity opened up. And it was that tight standing there, and all these Utah Valley people had come to see what they could do to help. And I think that's probably a frustration of us all, is so much capacity to give and so few opportunities to exercise that. So I'm committed to find for ways. I don't have a good roadmap though to get there. Larry?
Well, I just want to make a comment referencing President Trump. I have some intel friends. Months before he was ever elected, I saw the plan.
You know what, I'm gonna hand you the mic because I'm sensing a comment, not a question that I can repeat. And by the way, handing Larry a mic, that's not a safe thing.
It will be safe. Okay. I just wanted to say, months before he was ever elected, I saw their plan to impeach him and everything. I mean, everything we've been through was all laid out before he was ever elected. And I just felt like this is unfair, you know? And I'm thankful, though, that people, we give the opportunity for the investigations, but then the time comes where we got to move forward. And I'm thankful that that's what I'm hearing you say. We're ready to go forward. And I just want to thank you for that. But the other part, the next part,
I told
the
you.
lands. The lands.
Public lands.
That was my question.
Okay.
And the wealth that we need for, to make up the taxes, the lower taxes for our people here, for the country, is in the land. Job had it right. The earth giveth forth bread. And how do we get this back? Even the talk about moving water, to help the people there. I bet you there's some opportunities for small dams to put hydroelectric power on there to move that kind of water. How do we do that so we can get things going?
Okay, thanks, Larry. Let me touch on public lands for just a minute. It is a big part of what I do. I mentioned, if you were here earlier, I represent 7 counties. 4 of the 7 counties are 90% federal lands. And every day they wake up and deal with federal lands issues. Everything from water to extraction to payment in lieu of taxes. It's a big deal. Unfortunately, there's a lot of divisiveness in this and mistrust, and it pits people against each other. And like almost every other issue, if we can get rid of that divisiveness, we can actually find answers. Let me give you a really quick example. Emory County, many of you have heard of Bears Ears, right? Bears Ears is one of those places in our country, in our state, where there's a huge lack of trust on each side, where there's a lot of inability to come together and talk about solutions. A county almost next door to that, Emory County, has been working for decades on bringing harmony to their public lands issues. And I had the opportunity to pick up on that decades of work. We found 1 million acres where environmentalists, ranchers, outdoors enthusiasts actually agreed on how the land should be designated. And guess what they found? When they came together and didn't come with a one-side-take-all mentality, there was enough room to graze. There was enough room to extract. There was enough room to recreate. And there was enough room to preserve and protect. And we designated areas for all of those things. And they all came away, there was a little bit of exception, but almost all came away saying, this is good. And I think part of the answer to your question, Larry, is somehow breaking down these walls, getting the people together and talking. I've spent personally a lot of time on Bears Ears. I've been to visit all 5 of the native tribes that claim an interest in that at their reservation, sometimes multiple times. I've met with the locals down there. Do you know, in reality, they're this close? They're just not that far apart in what they both want, but they can't come together and find an answer. And so much of it is decades and decades and decades of mistrust. And we're working hard on that, and hopefully can bring resolution. We've got another big public lands issue up actually in Salt Lake, the Mountain Accord and the ski resorts. Some of our canyons, if you want to go up skiing on a Saturday, you got a couple-hour wait. It's terrible, right? Nobody benefits from that, and we're destroying our canyons from loving them too much. And so we're trying to find resolution on that as well. And yes, back at the back table, yes, we'll go here and then over here and over here. Yeah.
Yeah, mine's really quick. Are you endorsing anyone for governor?
Oh, that's a hard question. I'm going to repeat it for the TV. Am I endorsing anyone for governor? Let me say it this way. Utah is going to be the winner from this election. There are a host of candidates that are good, talented, experienced candidates. And unfortunately, most of them are my very, very good friends. And that sometimes I find myself caught in that. So I have tried to stay very neutral because of that. Let me just say this, is I think Utah will be the winner. I'm not sure who will come out of this, but the host of candidates, we are just very lucky, I think, as a state, to have this many men and women who are throwing their name in the ring to do this. My hope is that every single one of them will stay involved in Utah politics, because they're all just super. How's that for a political answer? Yes, sir. Yes.
Congressman, I'm Darrell Root. I'm Darrell Root, and I'm the state commander for the Veterans and Foreign Wars Department of Utah. Unfortunately, Kenny tells me when we go to Congress next week. I fly to DC tomorrow. You're flying in the day, the hour I'm supposed to meet with you, so I'll meet with your staff. So one, may I approach you and give you a challenge call? Two, I want to let everybody know, when you were campaigning, I actually called you and said I will not vote for you because of what you're standing when you were a mayor on veterans. And you took the time to meet with me on the phone at least and talk things out with me, and I was really impressed with that. And Daryl, I'm going to take my hat off on this. Daryl gives you a thumbs up. Make sure I say that right. But I'd like to give you my challenge coin.
Thank you. That means a lot.
You matter, sir.
That means a lot to me. Thank you. And I'm going to return the favor with my challenge coin.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your service. Do you know the rule is if you're exchanging the challenge coin and it drops, you have to buy drinks for everybody?
Right.
So that's why we were both very, very careful here. That's a great honor. Have you got another one?
Yeah, I did.
How many veterans have we got here today?
I brought a bunch for you.
Okay. Before this is over, I'd like to before it's over, let me shake your hand and give you all a challenge coin. Okay, I promised over here, and then we'll come right back to you, sir. And thank you. That means a lot to me.
John and Mark from Orem. I'll try to read it because I'm not very good at public speaking. Recently, healthcare companies across the nation have started canceling physician contracts, which leads to out-of-network charges for their patients. They've saved massive amounts of money by doing that because they can reimburse less and then give the rest of the balance to patients to pay instead of them paying out for insurance contracts that patients rightfully paid for. There's several bills right now coming up on this, labeled surprise medical bills. One of the most prominent ones is the Release Row bill, which has 110 co-sponsors, which is a quarter of the House, 60 Republicans and 40 Democrats, so it's a very bipartisan bill. Where do you stand on surprise medical billing and co-sponsoring this bill?
Thank you. I had heard about the issue not so much in insurance agencies canceling contracts, although I'll give you that's a piece of this. But imagine this. This is not an unlikely situation. You're exploring Canyonlands or you're down at Lake Powell and you have a serious accident and Lifeline comes in and takes you up to Price or some other place out of network and you get a bill. This is why they call it surprise billing. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars and your insurance won't cover it. All right, and that's what in DC there's a lot of dialogue along those lines, and so it's unusual that I have a meeting dealing with healthcare where surprise billing doesn't come up. I've not taken a position because I'm waiting for these people to coalesce around an answer that seems to resonate. It pits hospitals against doctors. It pits doctors and hospitals against insurance agencies. And we do need to come up with the right answer. I haven't looked at this specific bill, the Roe bill, but I'll be happy to look at that and have my staff look at that. And even if you want to leave your contact information, I'll report back to you after I've had a chance to look at it.
I talked to Liz Whitlock about it. But
Yeah. We lost Liz. We've got somebody that's replaced her, and I'd be happy to connect you with our new contact. It's very, very important that we get it right. Yeah, it's a big issue. Okay, I promised I'd come back here, and then this guy, Rob, right here, I'm a little worried about him. Doesn't he look like he came to cause trouble? Rob and I go back decades and decades.
We always talk about President Trump, and it seems like the Democrats do wake up trying to find something wrong with President Trump. But one of the things that I was most impressed with is I don't understand the quid pro quo. Quid pro quo was quid pro Joe when that actually happened. But in President Trump's situation, as a veteran, I looked at it that was not a quid pro quo. Because I was a battalion command sergeant major or a quartermaster battalion. And when he talked about charisma, most of the military runs on petroleum. That's where a lot of our fuel, or a lot of our money is spent. I'm just curious, how many millions of dollars was involved in that, and would Hunter Biden be part of a receiver of pushing to provide military control?
Okay, I don't even know where to go with this one, but I'm gonna comment on it.
I think the president did the right thing because he's protecting our interests. And when he asked for the help of them to investigate, I don't think it was a quid pro quo. He was protecting our rights, as he said he always would. That we are not going to. He's going to protect our interests. If we give them money, he wants it accountable. And I would like to have that accountable on the Biden side.
I was, let me just say this, I was actually disappointed in both the House side and the Senate side that we didn't take the time to talk to more witnesses. There are so many unanswered questions for the American people. And I think that goes, so this is what was really interesting about it, right? On the House side, we heard we don't have time, right? This is a national security threat. And we've got to rush this over to the Senate, so we're not going to take the time to get to these witnesses. And then we sat on it a month. But to be fair, on the Senate side, we also rushed it and didn't take the time. And I think that's left America without answers. And I think that's unfortunate, because I would like to know those answers to those questions that you're asking. Okay, remind me where oh, Rob, okay, yeah.
Mine's real quick. I don't think I'll need the mic. Okay. My purpose for being here today was really to say thank you. Thank you for the great job you're doing.
Well, Rob, thank you. That means a lot to me. As you well know, a lot of my colleagues around the country would not be this well received. And maybe I've got a little home court advantage here. I'm going down to Moab to do these, and I'm going up to Salt Lake, and it's probably not going to have the same reception, but it's very kind of you. I want you to know that I don't take lightly the stewardship that you have given me, and even all the problems, I'd take the job, right? It's an amazing honor. Can you imagine walking around Washington, D.C., looking up the Capitol, and saying, holy cow, I get to work there. During the State of the Union, I had kind of one of those pinch me moments where I walk into the Capitol and almost every 2 feet there's some type of security, and I just get to walk right past them, and I get to walk in and sit down and listen to the State of the Union. It's a surreal moment, right? And so thank you for giving me this opportunity, and really for your kindness today. Okay, here, now we're going to bring out the tough questions after, right? Here and here. And do you want, can you go real loud, or do you want me, and I can repeat your question too. Okay.
Thank you for Curtis Climate Chat. Just thank you. That's all I got.
So let me bring that up just a little bit. I started as a mayor really digging into clean air and feeling like I had my arms around clean air. I went back to Washington, D.C., and I was surprised. Guess what? Nobody in Washington talks about clean air. They talk about carbon. And it's taken me literally almost 2 years to figure out my path in Washington, D.C. in a very different place. And I feel like I've got my feet underneath me now. And so we started this, this weekly video. It's called #CurtisClimateChat. I'll tell you a story that you'll get a kick out of. The very first one we did, my team put out a tweet that said, join me for #CurtisChat, and I'm paraphrasing, but with something like this. Let's have a thoughtful, bipartisan discussion about how to move forward. That's all it was. The next morning, my chief and I, where's my chief, are driving up to the airport. My wife calls me in a anxiety mode and said, you have got to stop this. Everybody thinks you're in league with AOC. You've gone off the deep end. What are you doing? And it's because this word climate evokes that type of emotion from people. And one of the goals of the Curtis Climate Chat is to wade through the partisan nature of this and get to the common ground that there is so much of on climate. There are 12 bills before Congress right now that are bipartisan bills on climate. We ought to, right? I mean, we ought to pass those in an instant. And then we can have thoughtful dialogue about the things where we do disagree. But this is, and I said this earlier, if some of you were here, I'm sorry if I'll repeat it. This is my absolute conviction Utahns are the best environmentalists in the world. We just talk about it in different terms, right? Utahns want to leave the earth better than we found it. Everybody agrees to that. Now, how do we do that? Really becomes, and that's the purpose of the Curtis Climate Chat, is having really thoughtful discussions about how we can lead out, how Republicans can lead out on the climate. We've too long allowed ourselves to be branded as not caring about the environment. And there's a lot of really thoughtful things I think we can do. So thanks for tuning in. Yeah. I promised you, but I think this is a follow-up on that question, and we'll go over here. Yeah.
It's very short. I was going to say basically the same thing. I appreciate that you're a conservative talking about climate. I want to know if you have any specifics off the top of your head that are effective climate things that are fiscally responsible and conservative.
Absolutely. Let me just say, I believe that the opportunity before the United States right now is not too different than the Industrial Revolution, right? If we lead out on clean energy, if we, not just for our country, but for the world, we will dominate an economy for decades. And we need to be out in front of this, right? And it needs to be U.S. technology in sequestration, in everything that we do. And we can be green without being painful. One of my kind of complaints about some on the environmental side is they want to take the head off to fix the headache, right? Well, that's why they get so much pushback, right? Let's find things that don't take the head off to fix the headache, that are good, naturally good stewards, right? The things that we can do, and they don't have to hurt the U.S. economy. Now, one of the things that probably will be my next Curtis Climate Chat is this very interesting concept. We can use fossil fuels to reduce carbon. That sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But we shouldn't rule that out, right? One of the reasons we've reduced so much carbon in the air in the United States is our switch to natural gas, a fossil fuel, right? The natural gas in the United States is about 40% less carbon emitted when used than that of Russia. So can my friends on the left join me in trying to get U.S. natural gas to replace other natural gas around the globe? And those are the kind of thoughtful discussions I think conservatives can have.
You mentioned earlier a healthcare plan that's being put together by an organization you're a member of. Can you tell us any?
Yes, it's called it's the Republican Study Committee, and I believe you can Google Republican Study Healthcare Plan and see all the details. Let me just give you a few little nuggets. We've got to open up HSAs, health savings accounts. That's a big piece of it. We've got to get people putting tax-free dollars into their health care and then allowing them to spend that on health care. A big piece of it, and there's different names for it. I've heard it called concierge service and these other services where, in essence, you can pay it's probably more like $25, $30 per month, go into a doctor's clinic and get everything that can be done in that doctor's clinic, right, for $25 a month. Now, there's a huge problem there, which is there is a gap. If you have cancer or something that clinic can't handle, we need coverage for that. But that's where catastrophic policies come in. And so I'd love to get real nerdy with you on it, but if you'll Google it, and hopefully we can just take that a little bit further. You had a question. Where was the question at this back table? I'll come to you next. And we are getting close, so I'll start winding down, because this one's going to take a little while to answer. The question I'll repeat for the TV is, earlier today I had alluded to a bill where I changed my position on it before I voted, and what are the particulars of that. It's really controversial, so I was kind of hoping it wouldn't come up, but I'll just dig into it and share it with you. How many of you remember in the 1970s, our mothers, our grandmothers, our sisters fighting the ERA? I do. My mom was very opposed to it. The prevailing religion was very opposed to it. The Congress approved the ability for that to become an amendment to the Constitution. It had to be ratified by the states. So a number of states, and some will be, can give you the exact numbers, I'll give you the rough numbers. We were lacking about 5 states to approve that to become an amendment to the Constitution. There was built into that by Congress a timeline that said if it can't be reached by this date, then everything collapses. So a vote came before Congress to extend that timeline. There is considerable question, and it's probably not even question. I think it's been resolved. Justice Ginsburg has actually said we'll have to start over on this. But nevertheless, it came before Congress for a vote to extend that timeline and to give states more time to ratify that. Because I had started from this paradigm of my mother lobbying against this, of so much of my community lobbying against this, that was my paradigm. In my mind, this dealt with issues of abortion, this dealt with issues of men's and women's restrooms, it dealt with issues of men's and women's sports, and that somehow this was going to be a big blow to all of those issues. And so I was opposed to it. I started to hear from some of the women in the district who asked me to support this. And so I said, okay, well, tell me why. And to be honest, one of them that was very convincing was a woman who said, go home and read it, and then decide what to do. I had not read it. The 19th Amendment is, did you want to? No, I'm just winding up. Basically, this is what it says. It's a dozen or less words that said that we will not discriminate on the basis of sex. It doesn't say anything about abortion. It doesn't say anything about men's and women's restrooms. It doesn't say anything about men's and women's sports. It says we'll simply not discriminate. Now, I give you that once we agree that we're not going to discriminate on the basis of sex, we have some tough questions that need to be answered. But for a minute, just substitute almost any other word in there. We will not discriminate on the basis of race. We will not discriminate on the basis of religion, right? And race is probably a more pertinent one because we don't have any choice over that, nor do we have any choice over our gender. And it just occurred to me that we needed to solve all these very difficult issues, like restrooms, like abortion, coming from the basis that we're all equal. That doesn't seem that hard, right? Let's agree that we're equal, and then we will go solve these very, very difficult problems. I had put together a women's advisory council. Now, a little warning to all of you, if you're going to put together a council, you've got to be prepared to follow their advice. This council weighed in. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to do it in person. By the way, Lori is here, and Lori took the same journey with me. Is that fair to say? Where we were both like really strong no's on this, and we took the same journey together. The council weighed in. There's 6 of them from a very diverse political and demographic background, different rural and urban and everything. We tried to get everybody represented there. 5 of the 6 said, please vote for it. 1 said no. That one later on flipped after she learned more about it. So I had a 6-0 from this women's council. And it was really hard for me to say, well, okay, I'm gonna listen to women, right? And vote against it. And then there was another very compelling thing that's probably a little bit hard for everybody to understand. But imagine trying to be a guy, a man, and convincing women that I do support them. Right? I don't get very many opportunities to show my true colors, right? And I felt like that this was a very rare moment where I could actually, as a male, show women that I did value them and that I did view them as equal. I was in a little bit of a enviable position because my vote was not making the ERA. It wasn't a yes or no to the ERA. It was simply to allow the states more time. And granted, many people felt like even at that it was still symbolic that the states couldn't take that more time. But for all those reasons, I was one of 5 Republicans who voted yes. And it's always an uncomfortable thing to go against the grain in such a dramatic fashion. I was lobbied by Republican leadership to support it. And my answer to them was, I think I understand my district on this one. And I think this is where my district wants to be. Now, to those of you who my vote caused heartburn, I join you in your concerns. We have tough issues to work through, but women are equal. And so that was a very long answer to the question. To give you, I've got here, and then I'll finish with you right here. I won't forget your question. My staff met in DC no less than 6 times on this. And remember, we got less than a week. This is one of the things I hate about DC. These issues come at you and you get almost no time to digest them. We had a gazillion phone calls back and forth with the district and women in the district. And we put, I think, the type of thought that you would like me to put to every bill into this one, because I just felt like it was that important.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on the climate talk. I wasn't aware you did that, so thank you. I'm glad you did that. There's a whole lot more than just climate. As an environmental educator in the Nebo School District, I mean, there's loads of problems that we have. So I'll throw out the question, then I'll kind of give detail here. But as representative for the state of Utah, what can you do to help push for environmental education? And then let me just follow up by saying, I think there's a huge lack of understanding in education when it comes to environmental issues. If I take something that, a hot topic like nuclear power, it scares the living daylights out of people, because I think there's a huge lack of education. We say nuclear, we think bombs, we think Chernobyl, and if you analyze the data, nuclear power is like statistically the safest industry, across the globe. And so again, it can make a huge difference. 1 pound of coal can power a 100-watt bulb for 12 hours, where 1 pound of radioactive uranium can power a 100-watt bulb for 4,190 years. And you talk to nuclear engineers and they say nuclear is going to save the world. So there's like stuff like that. There was talk years back of putting a nuclear power plant along the Green River. And like I said, it scares people. They said, no, not in my backyard kind of mentality. But again, it's more than just
Good. And I'm going to jump in, and because we're going to be tight on time here, answer your question the best I can. But really the question is, what can we be doing to educate all of us more on environmental issues so that we're making good decisions?
just more like, it's like K through 12.
Yeah.
How can we educate
So,
our kids so they grow up?
I wish our state legislators were here, because I'm really going to kind of defer to them, right? And even more than that, school board members, right? But I will just say, from my perspective, this is why I'm doing the Curtis Climate Chat, is we've got to be having more conversations. You are absolutely right about nuclear. Unless our friends on the left, and this, to come back to answer your question about what conservatives should be pushing, we should be talking about nuclear. There's a project going on in my district for molten salt, a molten salt reactor, which is, nuclear is safe by your description, but it's even safer with molten salt. And so I'm trying to have those dialogues. I'm trying to get people, Republicans, not to be afraid. The reality of it is, if you ask most of my colleagues in DC about the environment, they put their head down and they walk out, right? We've got to be bold as Republicans that we have some answers, right? And as conservatives, this isn't a one-sided issue. Another reality is, unless we engage the entire world in this conversation, we're fooling ourselves. I love to tease my Democratic colleagues and tell them they deny science. Because they accuse Republicans of that. How do they deny science? They want to focus just on the United States. We're 10 to 15% of the entire carbon emissions in the world. Unless we're impacting global carbon emissions, there's no point to us taking off the head to fix the headache. Okay, we're going to make our last question here.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you coming and letting us speak to you about these issues. I think everyone in the room agrees that men and women are equal. That's what this whole country is really founded on. We've fought some fights to bring equality to our society. I do have a concern. If the ERA is passed and it becomes the 28th Amendment, which would prevail, the 28th Amendment or the First Amendment?
So I'm not a constitutional scholar, and I'm not even going to dare answer that question. One of the things that gave me some comfort in my vote is that everybody knows we have to start over on ERA. That even though Congress said you can have more time, by the way, it's through the House, it's not through the Senate, right? I get it. This brings up difficult questions. And if I try to oversimplify it, I say this: women are equal, but they're not the same. And I'll give you a great example. How many of you women are tired of going to an event and waiting forever in line at the restroom? Right? Right? Do we need more capacity in women's restrooms than men's? Yes, we do. Okay? We're equal, but we're different. And figuring out how we define that is what is ahead of us.
So here's my concern. It's apparent that the gender movement, and I'm distinguishing people from a movement. Okay? The movement is latching onto the ERA and pushing it hard. Article after article I've read indicates that they're really pushing this. So at some point, if it passes, I can see a Ninth Circuit judge determining that my religion is a hate group and not allowing me to practice my religion. That's deeply concerning to me. And so, hence my concern about your votes. I see where you're coming from, but I'm concerned that we're buying into really old language that was first proposed in the 20s and then reintroduced in the 70s. And it's a trap. And we just got to be awake.
So I join you in your concern. I do. I've spoken about religious liberty and religious freedom as it relates to rights of the LGBT community. I've been absolutely adamant that we don't need to compromise one at the sake of the other, but at the end of the day, we are guaranteed in the Constitution religious freedom. But I do not think we need to sacrifice one for the other. And basically my comment to the press on this was I actually think it's the same thing. We do not need to compromise Utah values, and I'd put religious freedom in that, to say that women are equal. And I join you in that. We do need to start over, and we need to find language that somehow navigates this.
Let's start over.
Right. Totally agree. Right. And that's what Ruth Gator Ginsburg said, is we have to start over on this. All right. Hey, should we do it again? Yeah. Listen, the success of this depends really, quite frankly, more on you than me. Thank you for being a great group this morning. We'll come back and do it again. Thank you for your support. It's been great to be here with you. And I'm going to drop the mic and run out of here and do family things. Hope you do it as well. Thank you.